All right, good afternoon, class. This is John, and we're getting back after it. You recall that today in class, in our discussion of Jared Diamond and his basic thesis in Guns, Germs, and Steel, and then our discussion of the tablero artistic style that was discovered both in the ancient city-state of Teotihuacan and also the Maya city-state of Copan. We see cultural transmission and evidence of that, which suggests to us that the ancient world of Mesoamerica was connected, maybe perhaps much as we would expect, because the ancient world of Mesoamerica was not all that different from our world today, and we know that there's all sorts of connection and shared trade and shared cultural influences in our world, and it wasn't all that different back then. So here's our objective. We started this in class. We're going to be looking at the Olmec, Zapotec, and the people of Teotihuacan to see, just get sort of a baseline to understand that the early societies and civilizations of what will later become Latin America were really sophisticated and quite complex. They were different from their counterparts in Europe and, let's say ancient Greece and the Roman Republic and Empire. They're different, to be sure, but yet shared many similarities in the sense that they were both quite complicated, quite sophisticated places to be. So the Aztec and Incan civilizations, which are going to be those great civilizations that were in place when the Europeans arrived in the late 15th century. The Aztec and Inca were products of cultural evolution that went back thousands of years, and we're seeing that in our comments, in the comments that follow. They had some of the basic features that historians use to describe quote-unquote civilization. And this had been in place well before the Inca and Aztec civilizations arise. So before we get ahead to looking at the more commonly understood Aztec and Inca civilizations, we want to see some of these earlier steps of how civilization first arrived within the Western Hemisphere. Historians mostly agree that civilizations emerged in response to the development of agriculture. So societies make a gradual turn from being a hunter-gatherer mode of existence. This is subsistence, right? They're just hunting and gathering to meet their needs that they have for a given day or few days. And eventually they're going to turn from hunter-gatherer to agricultural societies that practice domestication of animals and plants. In the Americas, so in the Western Hemisphere, this process really emerges between 6,500 and 3,000 BCE. So that's a few thousand years probably behind their counterparts in the Eastern Hemisphere. And from this time forward, the nomadic hunter-gatherer societies are going to become sedentary. They're going to be located in a fixed place and start permanent villages. So let's get going here and talk a little bit about this establishment. So to have a civilization, to develop the traits of civilization, we need sedentary settlement patterns. I shouldn't say we need that, but that's typically where civilization emerges. It's tough to build a sophisticated, complex society if you're on the move, because part of what makes a society sophisticated or complex is that it has a material emphasis. It has a built environment. It builds monuments that are either political or religious. It has things like roads. It has markets that foster trade, so on and so forth. So we're going to be pretty much fixed. And agriculture, of course, does a great job because agriculture both requires and makes possible permanent settlement. And this is because groups can settle in one place for prolonged periods only if that place can meet their needs for survival. If it can meet your need for survival, then you'll settle. If not, you have to keep moving on. But agriculture makes this possible because you can use the land surrounding you and you can use it repeatedly, season in and season out, so that it can produce more and provide for your needs. And of course, by being fixed in one place, if our mode of production, agriculture, allows us to do this, now we can start to grow a more complicated and sophisticated civilization around us. This also draws upon surplus, and when you have a surplus, and that surplus can be an abundance or overabundance of labor and an overabundance of food production, meaning product. This means that a portion of society can serve as farmers that provide the food for the rest of the society. And let's say if it's, as in the case of the city of Teotihuacan, if 2/3 of the people grow the food, that leaves 1/3 of the people to do more specialized things, to become artisans, potters, weavers, metalsmiths, priests, bureaucrats, you name it. And when you have these specialists, people who can do things besides produce food, then you allow your civilization to start to become more complex. You can have laws, you can have artists, you can have religion that becomes a little bit more sophisticated and ritualized, so on and so forth. So when you have agriculture, you also can have surplus. If you have surplus, you can have specialization. And then lastly, if you have specialization, you're inevitably going to have social hierarchy. What this means is that certain livelihoods are going to have greater prestige than others. So it might be that someone who is a potter or someone who is a priest will have greater standing and greater prestige within that society than, say, someone who's just producing food. Okay, so all these things go hand in hand and help build the basic building blocks of civilization. Here's our map we talked. We're going to be looking at the Olmec, the Zapotec, and then up here the people of Teotihuacan, and they are featured fairly well on this map. Okay, so we'll start with the Olmec. Okay, by the mid-2nd millennium BCE, so think 1500 BCE, that's like 3,500 years ago, complex societies emerged in Mesoamerica and the Andes. Okay, the Andes are farther south in essentially modern-day Peru. And these complex societies were made possible by the surpluses of agricultural advances. Okay, so breakthroughs in animal domestication, understanding of how to use plants and to reproduce them in rather predictable ways. Some of the first cities formed as ceremonial centers, places where people could gather to worship or pay homage to their gods, so on and so forth. But eventually these societies flourished into culturally sophisticated areas throughout various parts of the Americas. And these became vital building blocks for civilization within the Americas. So we start with the Olmec. The Olmec existed from roughly 1200 to 400 BCE. I think your textbook might say 1500, but there are a couple different date ranges used there. So we'll go with 1200 to 400 BCE. This is kind of actually coincides fairly well with like Old Testament prophets. They tended to emerge upon the horizon of world civilization at roughly the same time as the Olmec are emerging. And the two ceremonial centers that your textbook talks about are San Lorenzo and La Venta. And this was located in a nice sort of rain forest, which had some benefits for agriculture, and the early Olmec were able to turn this into quite an advantage. Initially, San Lorenzo and La Venta were not all that well populated. They were ceremonial centers. They had some monumental architecture. They also had some really important, or I shouldn't say important, but rather impressive public monuments, things like their characteristic stone heads. These heads are very interesting, aside from being 8 feet tall, weighing 20 tons, and coming from rock that was quarried some 50 miles away. These heads reveal something about the division of labor and the organization of this Olmec society. You can't accomplish feats like this unless you're doing some rather impressive things to organize your labor and have people willing to work hard for the sake of the public good. Okay. Their economy, we see all sorts of evidence of jade figurines, enough to suggest that jade and other precious stones were very important parts of the Olmec economy. Similarly, the Olmec produced quite a bit in the way of textile production. We know this from evidence like spindles that have been found in places like San Lorenzo and La Venta. They also invented the ball game. Essentially the game that the Maya are given a lot of credit for featuring as part of their ceremonies and their everyday function within Maya society. But this ball game was evident even before the Maya, and we credit the Olmec with inventing it. Olmec also bring about a 260-day ritual calendar, which features, among other things, a very sophisticated understanding of their world, and this will be paired later with some of the astronomy of the Maya. But this ritual calendar is something that the priests would use to honor rituals to make sure that they're maintaining peace and harmony within the universe. The Olmec also have some basic writing. They use glyphs, which are essentially like written objects, and glyphs are really the earliest form of writing in the Americas, and the Maya will adapt this, and the Maya had the most sophisticated writing system in the Americas, even more sophisticated than the Aztec, which would follow them. So we see quite a bit of intellectual accomplishment within the Olmec, and we also know that they traded along fairly large pathways, jade and obsidian, and they, as we know, had regular contact with the people of Teotihuacan, as well as some of the early Mayan city-states. Okay, I'm going to skip the Zapotecs for now and focus on Teotihuacan. Teotihuacan is one of the great pre-classic civilizations. I guess actually we should call it a classic civilization. It coincided with the Maya in Mesoamerica. And the people of Teotihuacan, this is the largest city in the world during much of its existence, from 100 BC to 750 CE. And Teotihuacan is really a fascinating physical specimen. We see that it covered roughly 12 square miles. It had over 2,000 people at its height. Significant that 2 out of 3 people were food producers, while 1/3, and that's a huge surplus of labor, by the way, 1/3 of the population was dedicated to other things, artisans, merchants, bureaucrats, priests, so on and so forth. And so this marks a really pretty impressive set of accomplishments. You'll see here, just looking down this avenue, the Street of the Dead, you'll see the Pyramid of the Sun here, and this picture looks like it was taken probably from the top of the Pyramid of the Moon. So large structures, and there were also quite a few residential places. You see this, 100 palaces, 2,000 apartments. This was not just a ceremonial center. The people of Teotihuacan lived here and functioned regularly. The secret to Teotihuacan's power was its control. It had a very powerful military, which it used to control the obsidian trade. It had a monopoly, essentially, and that was a very advantageous thing to have. Its warriors show this cotton armor, which we'll see later with the Aztec. And I'm going to stop there for now. Thank you.